The universe does not want your life to be hard. It wants you to be happy, and it's as simple as that. So if there's a situation you're in that's causing you unhappiness or that feels too hard, there's a message there. There's something you're missing. There's a pivot that needs to happen or some soul searching you need to do there, because life should be fulfilling and you should be happy.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is an open journal dive into people's lives as I sit and I uncover the real story behind my guest journey, finding out what makes them who they are, talking about all the ups, all the downs, and all those thoughts and feelings in between, uncovering the parts of their story that we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. I am your host. My name is Ross Tyson. I am a creative of many kinds, a maker of, well, many things. And as you probably guessed, yes, one of those things I do is indeed podcasting. And here's a reminder up front to make sure that you're subscribed to this show on whatever platform that you're checking this out on right here, right now. If you really like the show and you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any episode, follow the podcast around social at WYDH Pod. If you're on YouTube, hit that like button so it tells an algorithm that this show matters to you. You hear these things all the time from every creator of all kinds, but it all truly does help more than you may think. The support can go a really, really long way. And speaking of support, I'm going to tell you about a few amazing supporters and sponsors of this show that I've got here. And then we'll dive into my conversation this week with the wonderful Ashley Tracy, who is a photographer from right here in Ohio. But first, this month I've welcomed a brand new sponsor to the show. It's one that I am very excited to tell you about because it is the company of past guest of this show, Simi Bowditch, who is an absolutely wonderful human being with her wonderful brand, Unmeasured. So, what is it? Well, Unmeasured is a virtual bar class studio that celebrates your body and never shames it. When you join, you'll have access to hundreds of bar classes, including a new on-demand class added every week, along with weekly live classes, epic playlists, and even the occasional pop-in from guest instructors right at your fingertips and in the coziness of your own home. Not to mention that a monthly membership is less than the price of a drop-in at most bar studios. Now, each class, whether you choose a short and sweet 5-minute flow, a longer, more in-depth 45-minute class, or anything in between, it'll help you create a more feel-good, intuitive relationship with movement itself. Every detail of the Unmeasured experience is 100% free from diet culture and 100% full of love. So head over to movementunmeasured.com to experience for yourself what their members are calling life-changing and why their members share that they have never loved a workout more. Unmeasured is more than a movement membership. It's a movement all on its own. So come and join them at movementunmeasured.com. Now, this episode is also sponsored by PromoWest Productions. I've got some concerts to tell you about. Of course, if you live here in Columbus, Ohio, and you're interested in catching a live show, getting that live music experience, well, then you may want to check out one of these upcoming concerts that are coming your way here in Columbus via PromoWest. They've got Mitch Rowland at Newport Music Hall on March 19th, Slater Kinney at Newport Music Hall on March 20th, Guster at Kemba Live on Friday, March 22nd, and then get this, Gwar is coming to town, and they're playing at the Newport Music Hall on March 28th. I would suggest bringing a pair of clothes that you don't mind getting stained in a red blood-like substance, most likely, if you're going to that show. So if you do want to grab tickets to that show, or any of the other ones I listed, you can jump over to axs.com, or as always in general, for more information on these or any other upcoming concerts, if you want to know who's coming to town and when, you can find all that information that you need over at promowestlive.com. But hey, also, are you by chance looking for a place to live? Then What You Don't Hear is your hookup, because we are sponsored by our friends over at River and Rich. Now, River and Rich brings together quality apartments, desirable amenities, and a vibrant artistic community. Located right in Franklinton, River and Rich offers 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and townhouse-style apartments with open floor plans, oversized windows, and modern finishes. The amenities, those include a huge 24/7 gym, a heated pool, a fully stocked coffee bar, and a secure package delivery room pretty much everything you need for a cool place to live. And it doesn't just stop at the building. River and Rich embraces and connects with the art-filled Franklinton community. They've got local art and murals featured all throughout the community itself. River and Rich is both a place to go home to and is also becoming a living piece of art in its own. So if that environment sounds like something that you want to live in, well, of course you can. Go check it out. They offer both guided and self-guided tours, so you can go check out an apartment anytime. Visit their website at riverandrichcolumbus.com for more information. Also, check this out. Because you listen to this podcast, I might be able to help you get a freaking apartment, because now new applicants can receive up to half off their security deposit if you use the code WYDH pod. So again, for more information, please contact River and Rich. Certain restrictions might apply. Hop over to riverandrichcolumbus.com to get things moving and go join the colorful life over at River and Rich. All right, let's get to it. My guest this week is photographer Ashley Tracy. She does photography of many kinds, but really specializes in the realm of weddings, couples, and families. And let me tell you, she's great at every single bit of it. I recently did some video work for Ashley, and in that, we did a series of interviews with her about, all that she does, and her passion and her knowledge behind all of it really shined through in those interviews. So I thought, what better time than now to go ahead and take a deeper dive into getting to know her after knowing of her and her work for quite some time by the time we did those interviews. But it gave me a little hint of how passionate she is about everything she does, but we dive into all of that here. You know how this show goes. We dig into her start in photography, the process of making it her full-time gig, growing up, where her interest in any of this came from, using social media to her advantage, and we even dive into some really cool spiritual stuff that's really rad, along with being a mom and a business owner, juggling all of those things. And folks, there's just a ton more. You see the runtime of these episodes, right? There's always a ton more to these conversations and those main general points. So, without any further ado, let's get to know Ashley Tracy right here in episode 105 of What You Don't Hear. Ashley, thank you so much for being down to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
So very stoked to actually sit down and chat, which clearly we're pretty stoked to sit down and chat while not in a work environment, because we literally, from the moment you got here, nonstop talked.
Yes.
Until about a few seconds ago when we actually decided to record everything.
Maybe we should start.
Yeah, it's hey, we're talking about a lot of good life stuff and how we control our lives and how we feel. We should probably record this at some point. So, yeah, I'm stoked to actually get to sit down with you in kind of an uninterrupted environment. Because, the only way that we know each other is through work-related things, like us doing video and all that sort of stuff for you. Mm-hmm. And even before that, I'm excited to get to know, even though, yes, we asked you so many questions during those videos that we shot for the work you do, heard a lot about you through those, obviously. But I'm excited to get to know kind of a different, the full story of you and what you do.
Okay.
Because it's also funny that for a few years, you were sort of this creative enigma to me, because Josh would mention you all the time.
Really?
Yes. So he was always like, "Oh, we're gonna work with this Ashley Tracy person at some point. She's so cool and she does this. You should really look at her stuff, and she does great work, but she also does great at social media. I think you guys would get along really well. Any conversation I've had with her, she seems like she's such a cool person. I can't wait to work with." And then it was because we were trying to work together for at least a solid year or two.
It was almost 2 years.
Yeah,
that I had reached out to Josh and I knew I wanted to make a video for my business, but there was either COVID or I just had my son, and then we sold our house, and then we were going to build in one place, and then we sold that land, and then we moved again.
Yes.
It was just a lot happening, but he and I talked 2 or 3 times in that window, and it was exactly like what happened with you and I before we started recording here, where it was we would talk, and the point was to set up a date to film, but instead we would end up talking about life and goals and work, and it'd be 45-minute calls.
Yes. And I think through that, he connected with you pretty well. So you would constantly get mentioned to me of like, he was always just like, I can't wait until we work with her. I can't wait till you meet her. Like, this is going to be great. We're going to make really cool stuff, but also you guys are going to get along. So like Ashley Tracy was always this like creative enigma just floating around for a while. I'm like, when are we going to meet this? Like, when are we going to meet this person? When are we going to work with this person? Like, all right. And then so finally when we got to work together, it was fun. And we created like a lot of fun stuff, but I am definitely excited to actually sit and take the deep dive into things today.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you a question that opens up all the floodgates.
Okay.
So like, you do photography. Mm-hmm. Where does any of that begin? Like, where does that start? Is that like a handful of years ago is when I found a camera and I thought it was cool? Is it when I was a kid, I started loving it? Like, where does that even pop up?
I mean, so like my first thought was like those Kodak disposable cameras that you get when you were like a teenager for me. I don't think people use them anymore, but, and then if I like really am honest with myself and go way, way back, I grew up in like a kind of volatile home situation. And my solution to a lot of what I was dealing with was always writing. I journaled all the time and quickly just like fell in love with writing. And so I knew immediately that that's what I wanted to do with my life, was be a writer, and went to college to do that. And then my dad ended up being involved in a really high profile shooting. He was on the SWAT team, and I wrote an article for it for my college paper. And it was picked up by the local TV station in Indianapolis. And the anchor told me, she was like, we need writers in television. Would you be willing to do television? And I was like, I don't know, I guess. And so I went to an internship for that and fell in love with using video in telling stories, because I met really great photographers and videographers doing that and realized like, oh, this is kind of similar to journaling, only I'm telling stories for other people, and I can use natural sound and video and photo, and it enhances all of that. So I was like, this is cool. I could do that. And so I did news for several years and then quit that job to stay at home with my daughter and started taking photos of her all the time. And then was just like, I would love to do this for other people and be my own boss and sort of combine all the things I love to do into one. So before I even had a business, I put together a website because again, the writer in me was like, oh, I want to tell this whole story of who I am and who this company is. And,
yes.
And then it just kind of started from there. And I really feel like I like taking pictures because it's just another way of telling a story, of writing. And it's like, I don't know, relationship too. Mm-hmm. I know that what I loved about being a reporter was just getting to meet new people and constantly being involved in lots of outside aspects of life. And this job is very similar to that. Like, you meet so many people and you get to talk to so many people, and you kind of have to always have your reporter hat on in a lot of ways, especially when you shoot weddings. So does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And there's so many things that I want to dig into there. Now, something else we were talking about this before we recorded. Mm-hmm. You said you're also the oldest sibling?
I am the oldest daughter, which if oldest daughters are listening, they know. But yeah, you're the oldest son.
Yes.
Oldest, like being the oldest just means something. Like, we're all a little bit crazy.
Yeah. And
we all struggle with perfectionism. And we all want to help everyone all the time. Mm-hmm. I feel like,
which is a ton of what we were talking about. Of like, yeah, I feel this way, and you were like, yeah, you're the oldest, right? And I'm like, yeah, I am. Like, you were like, yep.
Why
absolutely.
do you see me?
Yeah, I'm like, yep, I got that. So how many other siblings do you have?
Just one.
Just one. Okay. So then, did you? I guess take me back to like growing up. Where did you grow up at?
I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Indianapolis. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what's growing up like? Is that like town life? Is it like out in the middle of nowhere life? Is it like, take me back?
Okay, so I was born in California, lived in Kentucky for a little while, but did schooling in Indianapolis, Indiana. My parents were very young parents. They were both in the military, had me when they were like 21, I want to say. So they moved all over, landed in Indianapolis. My dad was a police officer there. And we lived in a suburb of Indianapolis, I would say like 25-ish minutes south of there. I went to like religious private school all through middle school and high school. And then I went to Butler University, which is in downtown Indianapolis, for my 4-year.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier, growing up, maybe a little strange.
It was just very volatile. My parents fought a lot.
Okay.
There was a lot of just not great. I don't want to throw them under the bus,
Of
but
course.
it wasn't great. Just a lot of trauma to
Mm-hmm.
unpack there. And when I look back on it now, it's probably why I feel like the empath in me even exists, because you learn at a young age that you kind of have to read the room, and even the smallest of things mean something. You know, how did that person set down a cup when they got home, and how did the door close, and just little things like that. You're nodding because you know.
Literally, I'm nodding so much because I'm like, yes, 1,000,000% yes.
Yeah. I don't think I really understood until after 30, just, I don't know what that all means. And like really unpacking like childhood trauma. And instead of it weighing down on you, using it as oh, that's why I am good at this. And like wearing it proudly. And then when you meet other people who also went through something similar, which is most people, like most people don't have great home lives, you can kind of bond over that. And if they're still carrying it in a sense of, oh, that sucks, like, you can be like, well, actually, you can turn that into something that you can really use as a superpower, honestly.
1,000,000%. Like from big things to small things. Because like you were saying, a traumatic memory can be like, oh, I remember how they set that cup down, and then how I had to read the room, and based off of like what my interaction needed to be with this parental figure, like was based off of what vibe am I kind of catching off of them. And it's like, I use that all the time now, and I can be a pretty good read of people, and I can be a pretty good read of a room, and be like, oh yeah, like, and I could do that for a long time. But like you said, like the more we mature, the older we get, the more you're able to kind of uncover those things, but then uncover those things and use them as not, oh my God, things are so traumatic, life sucked, but okay, maybe life sucked a little bit, but now what can I use that for? And that's 100%. Like I can identify those things almost as like, it sounds cheesy, but like almost in a way is like a little bit of superpowers, kind of, you know what I mean? Like comes from like not fun place, but I do feel it's a valuable skill to be able to read a room, to be a little bit more self-aware, to know how you got to carry yourself. And everybody has a version of that. But I do think you're right in the sense of some people, it does just sort of like, it weighs them down more than, and again, this is just a cliche, but it's like it weighs them down more than kind of it can lift them up. And I do think that we can take those things and then turn that into, okay, what can I do with this? Because it's with me no matter what. It's probably not an easy thing just to wake up the next day and say, oh, that past trauma doesn't exist anymore. Who needs it? It's out of here. I'm going to act different. It's like, no, there's always going to be parts of that with you. So how can you be valuable with those things? Like, how can you give them value now that even though it comes from a crappy place? Now, before we make this whole podcast about that, because I'm like, yep, no, I relate to everything you are saying about that. You mentioned that like early on you identified writing was sort of like the safe space to kind of enter into, the place to kind of like actually express yourself and all that. Like, do you remember when you found that, or like what that was? Like, did you just randomly start writing one day, or were you like, I'm feeling these things, how do I get it out? Or
I think it started with liking poetry, and I was in my very like moody phase and found Sylvia Plath and started reading, and was just like, oh, I would like to do this too, because again, like life wasn't great. And then as I started writing poems, I would just write how my day was, and write what happened that day, and write how I was feeling about it, and realized at the end of it I always felt better. And I journaled so much that I would have like piles of these in my closet, and I loved always being able to look back and be like, oh my gosh, and you laugh at yourself, you know. There's pages with like tears on them, and you're reading it a year later like, oh, you're ridiculous, you know. But the power of being able to do that, I always really liked too. So I don't know how woo-woo you want to get with this.
Take it wherever you want to go.
But I told you a little bit before we started that I've been having like a spiritual awakening. And part of that is because of a podcast I've been listening to called A Psychic Story. Okay. Nicole Bigley is the author, host of that. She's a psychic, and she talks about how we're all psychic. We all have a little bit of psychic ability, and there's several different clairs, I guess. And that emotional intelligence or like internal knowing is actually one of them. Mm-hmm. And I had her on a podcast that I have with my friend called Just Call Me. And she and I were talking about how you and I are. Mm-hmm. And she was like, well, that's actually one of the gifts and it can be developed. And when I learned that earlier in the year, I really started thinking about how it relates to every job I've ever had. And I started thinking to myself earlier this year, like, what would happen if instead of seeing it as something that was born of a bad experience I had, seeing it as a gift and turning it off and on, because it's something that if you just leave on all the time can be draining, which you and I also talked about. So I'm trying to be more intentional this year about turning it off and realizing I don't need to read everything all the time. And I don't need to absorb everything all the time, because like weddings, for example, which is what I do, that's a lot of people. And it's a lot it's very useful to be able to walk into a room of 50 people you've never met before and immediately kind of know, ooh, mom's not in a good mood. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure what happened, but she's not in a good mood. I'm going to proceed with caution there. Oh, my bride is nervous about something. What's she nervous about? And looking around and figuring it out. But then when you get home, I've found you have to have ways of sort of ridding yourself of that, because if you don't, you take all that in all day and then it's there, and then you get home and you absorb everything from your family as well. And then it's just layers and layers and layers. And like, so anyway, this year I've very much been trying to like reset almost, and like figuring out, okay, that experience, that it's over, let's let it go. Yes. So that you can be fresh and not be carrying that with you all month and all year.
1,000,000%. That is a lot of like the kind of the positive detachment that we were sort of talking about before we rolled, of like me identifying how much of my energy needed to go into something and how much did I need to give, but also what am I going to get out of this? Like, is this just a drainer? Because if it's just going to be a drainer, I need to reposition how I think of it, how I see it, and what I give to it, so I'm not losing too much, right? It's like, is this shoot just a job? Doesn't mean I'm not going to care about it, but is it just a job? Do I need to not put every bit of my creative being, my heart, my soul into this thing? It needs what it needs. It'll get the job done. I know it's going to look good. It's going to sound good because I know my level of caring is where it's at. Like, I know the base level, like the average amount of caring that I like start at always, right? It's like, it's a lot no matter what. But I don't need to overdo it, because then what's the trade-off? What am I getting in return? And I would also love to know, I honestly love that you brought that stuff up, even though you're like, I don't know how woo you want to get. I'm like, no, yes, let's go. How, like, do you feel like you are, and you were sort of explaining this, but I'm still going to ask, like, do you feel like you're relatively in tune with like the energy in a place most of the time?
Very much so.
Yeah. So what does that feel like for you? Because I feel like...
It feels like whatever is happening.
Yes, because this is absolutely a thing that we can relate on. 100%.
Well, so I guess I just bring it up because even though I knew I had, I don't know, the ability to sort of read a room or read a person and how helpful it was in my job. Because this really, ultimately, at the end of the day, anyone can, photography is a very, I don't want to say basic, but it's an easy thing to learn. What's not easy in what I do is understanding someone's story, how they feel about themselves, and then taking that into a photograph and showing them the best parts of themselves that they didn't think were there. But you have to, in my opinion, you have to know them and whatever. So anyway, your initial question was
the idea of like exactly what you were saying, though, is like being able to walk into a situation and like being able to really feel that energy, but then aware enough to make use of it. Because anybody can walk into a room and be like, oh, vibes are off. And then just sort of add to the bad vibes. You know what I mean? Like,
I guess, so I knew that I could read the energy of a room, and I knew that I could read energy of people. What I didn't know was that I was doing it necessarily. I didn't think of it the way the podcast I mentioned frames it, which is it's a gift, it's an ability, it's part of your intuition. It's your way of seeing the world that's unique to you. I saw it as a trauma experience that I was then using in everyday life to survive, and not as something that I was tapping into willingly to thrive. Mm-hmm. And I also wasn't seeing it as a gift that I had power over and could turn on and off and could then cleanse. So like one of the things that I like opened my eyes at the beginning of the year was just realizing like your own soul, like I'm a soul having a human experience, not the other way around. And so when she was talking about that on one of her episodes, and I forget who the co-host was, but it was the best example ever of something I do all the time and you probably do all the time. And they were talking about how in order to thrive in your soul's purpose, you have to really harness your energy. Okay. And I didn't realize how much I was not doing that. And her example she gave, and I'll try and find the episode for you so you can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
But the example she gave was that how often during the day are you, let's say you came to record this podcast and you sat down and you're like, oh, did I lock the door? Right? So you're here, but your soul is actually traveling back through your day going, did I lock the door? Oh, maybe my keys are here. Are they here? And she was talking about losing keys as an example of like when you forget your keys or lose your keys, you go through the house and think of everywhere you've been. That's your soul leaving your body to overanalyze that situation. And so I know I have 2 kids. I have however many clients. When I'm in a wedding, it's how many different people. Am I actually in the moment I'm supposed to be in? Or am I thinking, what's my husband doing? What's Elena doing? What's Ezra doing? Is my mom okay? What's the client doing? What's the bride doing? I'm actually 90,000 different places. And so this year I've been trying more to like, no, right here. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to be here, you know? And that's actually really hard to learn how to do. And it's part of the whole reading the room thing, because if you try to read everything all the time, that's not helpful either.
Man, that is so good. I love.
I can't take credit.
No, yes, absolutely. I just love that you have brought that up though, because those are so many things like we were talking about earlier, like the last handful of years, I feel like I've done a lot of like mental, emotional, and potentially now that I'm understanding spiritual shifts, right?
Yes.
Of being really, really focused on just like being present, my well-being, what is actually bringing me joy, what is actually bringing me happiness, and being very, very protective of my energy to the point where sometimes I'm like, is this actually the right thing to do? Like, it doesn't feel like, it feels better, but it doesn't feel correct because most of the time I think our mind's supposed to be everywhere and you're supposed to be stressed about a billion things at once. And then it's sometimes hard when you talk to other people, and not that there's a right or a wrong, but it's hard when like I'm trying to express to somebody like, in the last week, this really difficult thing happened, but here's how I'm handling it. Here's how I'm not letting it get to me. And here's what I'm doing about it. And their part of that is, my last week has been chaos and it sucks and it's terrible. And why isn't yours? And I don't like, that's a very hard thing to almost navigate. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is when you kind of become more in tune with those things, I feel like it has been it's hard to balance it for yourself. I feel like it's almost hard to exist in the world as that, if that makes sense. I'm not saying we're some like magical human beings or something like that. Yeah. But like when you get more in tune with those things, for me, it's often been strange in a lot of situations because again, like I can be in tune with my happiness or my whatever. And if a friend asks me what or if I ask a friend how their week's been, they say it sucks and it's terrible. But then they ask me how my week's been, and I'm like, do I want to actually tell you? Because now I feel kind of strange that you know what I mean? Like, even though a bad thing happened and I will share that with you, I feel like I'm getting it under control, but I almost don't know how to tell you that. Because I think a lot of things are, it's either terrible or it's great. There's often not an in-between. But I feel like when you get in tune with a lot of these things and you can be able to read those situations and all that sort of stuff, I feel like there's just such a weird balance around it to try and figure out. Because I also never want to walk around and be like, I'm so in tune with myself. Look how cool I am. People are like, dude, you're annoying. Like, that's, you know.
Well, I will say, so I listen to these podcasts and I'm thinking about all of this stuff now, but I by no means have anything figured out.
Right.
Like I mean, my best friend, Autumn, ask her, like, I freak out about things 97 times a day. Or ask my husband. My husband is like the total opposite of me, where everything's always fine, you know? And he's like my rock through, because I'm always like, oh, it's all, there's a panic alarm's always going off somewhere. I guess I just feel like there's so much power in having the words to even know a feeling you're feeling. And so, for instance, anxiety. I have constant anxiety all the time. And especially with my job, because what I thought before was because I was worried about, is the client going to love it? Or is something going to go wrong? And what I realize now is, sure, it's partly that, but it's also a part that I'm absorbing too much energy, honestly, not just from myself. Weddings are nerve-wracking. So when you walk into a wedding, everyone's nervous and you're picking that up. You know what I mean? You're absorbing that. And if you don't find ways to release that, for me, it's running, then it's just there. It's like, let's go. Like, I'm nervous all the time. And I didn't know why before. So even though I haven't fixed it and it still happens, I at least now know what's happening and kind of try to curb it as best as I can. But that being said, as far as like someone saying, I had a really bad week, or how do you navigate, maybe if somebody doesn't have the verbiage for that. I think anytime you're somebody who, I don't know, is a little bit more tapped into stuff, people like talking to you about stuff. You know what I mean? So I think it's easier to navigate when you look at it as, okay, they just need to vent. You know what I mean? 99% of the time, nobody wants you to be like, let me fix this for you.
Exactly. Yep.
They just want to complain, which I get because I do that all the time.
Venting is great. Yes, venting is wonderful. Something you said in there that I feel like I tend to lean on a lot with this, because like, yes, I know both you and I are going to say it. Anybody who is sharing like, here's what's worked for me, always usually prefaces that with, I'm not perfect. It does not work all the time, right?
I'm psychotic.
Yeah, everybody knows that. It's like, we're all messed up. It's always, you know, everything we do is messy, but you can still find a way to like contain the mess, right? Doesn't mean that it's not there. But I think two things that I always lean on when it comes to any of this stuff, whether we're talking emotional well-being, mental well-being, spiritual well-being, anything, the things I always lean on, and you said this, is the acknowledgement, being able to clearly identify and acknowledge, how am I feeling right now? But this isn't who I am. This isn't my life. How am I feeling right now? The first part is acknowledgement, and the second part, I think, is just the maintenance. I think we're all always in maintenance mode. There's never like, I think when a lot of people have these types of conversations about any of the well-beings, any of the whatever, taking care of yourself, people do tend to look at it in black and white. Again, like I said earlier, it's either really, really bad, but if you don't have anything really, really bad to say, oh, you think your life's just great, don't you? You know, and no one's really saying that. But I do think that people tend to kind of have those inner feelings. They do, of like, oh, there's Ross talking about positive mindset again. He just has it all figured out, doesn't he? It's like, no, I'm actually sharing with you the way that I simply maintain my day to day. It doesn't mean that none of that stuff exists. It doesn't mean that I don't battle and feel anxiety or battle and feel heavy depression relatively often. But when I talk about these things of learning to be in tune with myself or ourselves, or figuring out what are those conscious efforts that we can do after we acknowledge how we're feeling, the actions are what's really, really important. Those are very hard to do depending on what you're feeling. But the actions are a really, really important part of it. And so to me, it's like the action does not mean I think positively, therefore tomorrow I'm not depressed anymore. No, thinking positive becomes a tool to get you through that, to then help you take the action to move through that. And you simply learn how to maintain that better. You're going to most likely live with all of these things, like you were talking about earlier with like the trauma things. The trauma is always going to be there. That little like grief button inside of us is going to randomly get hit sometimes. It's not going to be pressed permanently all the time, right? We grow, we mature, we learn, we get past things. But it doesn't mean that it's never there. So at some point, that grief button about that situation is going to get hit, and that day is going to be a hard day. We're going to feel it, or that week or that month or whatever. We're going to feel depressed. We're going to feel sad, traumatized, whatever. But I think the valuable part is not in pretending that that stuff doesn't exist. And I think, again, a lot of these conversations get taken that way, where someone kind of has that blockade up of, oh, you're just saying it's not real and you're saying it doesn't matter. No, I'm saying it matters so much that learning how to do maintenance on that and understanding it's a part of you that you need to live with, that's the valuable part. So I love that you brought up the acknowledgement part, because I think sometimes a lot of us tend to believe that acknowledging these feelings is making it our identity. And I know that's maybe a hard thing to balance sometimes, of my life just sucks, everything bad happens to me. It might feel that way. Totally understand. I've been there. I've absolutely been that person in years past of like, wow, life just sucks, huh? But there was always something that's like, no. I don't think it actually does. This situation, this time frame right now, this whatever, this emotion that I'm feeling, that's what sucks. But maybe it doesn't always have to be that way. And I think that is the value of being able to acknowledge that part. Acknowledge that it's feelings and emotions that we're having, that it's a moment in time that we're experiencing. And then what actions can I take? Not to get rid of it, because I really don't know if we get rid of it. Yes, you get rid of a situation. If there's a person in your life who's causing terrible things, you can physically get rid of that. But we both know everything that was left over from that situation with that person, that's with us permanently now. It's everything we were talking about at the beginning of this. Oh yeah, I'm learning that my responses to this are actually kind of a trauma response, but that doesn't have to be a negative thing. I'm not saying anytime anyone's mean to me, I burst into tears and I'm like, why are you this? You know, it's like, oh, this makes me feel really weird and uncomfortable. Oh, it's because of this. It's because I grew up in this situation. And just like you said earlier, how can I now make that a tool in my tool belt to then do the maintenance on my emotions in this situation?
Yeah. Anytime someone has like a visceral reaction in terms of like, I don't know, if someone says they're upset about something and it trigger, if it's physically triggering, I always, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I always think it's something they haven't fully worked through yet, which is fine. Yeah. We're all at different stages of things all the time.
Exactly.
For instance, I mean, my sister and I process our childhood very differently. It still causes her to physically cry, you know, a lot. And sometimes when you're talking to her, you can sense that she's still carrying it, as if we still live in that house on that street. And there's a difference between feeling that way about being upset about something and, okay, I've left the house. I live several towns away from the house. It's in the past. You know what I mean? I'm here. That's there. And I just feel like maybe give people grace if they respond with, oh, everything sucks, because they're clearly not healed from something quite yet. Would be the best way I would, you know what I mean? You 100%. Have to know that not everybody's where you are. Yep. And it's important in even what I do on a daily basis. You know, if I've got a group of, I don't know, 20 people in a wedding party and somebody's making the wedding all about them, like clearly they're just at a little bit more of an immature stage of their life. I'm not going to get mad about it. I'm not going to throw them a face about it. Like there's no point. You're not going to convince them otherwise. No, because then you're only adding negative fuel to the fire. Right. You know, because then you're giving some sort of a negative response, and then what does that turn into? And that, I genuinely think everything you just explained is, in the last handful of years, I think one of the most valuable things that I have not necessarily learned, because I was always aware of it, but really got more in tune with of, okay, let's make this more of a prominent feeling of like, yeah, remind yourself, give people grace. Like, because back in the day, especially in the creative world, I would often project my own wants and needs or feelings into a project with the others involved. And what I mean by that is, we talked about this earlier, you know, like I always wanted everything to be 110%. It was always like, it has to be perfect. It has to be the most cool, amazing thing ever, blah, 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 blah.
my version of perfect, my version of 110% is different than someone else's version of perfect or 110%. So off and on, I would often find myself like being disappointed in a situation or upset in a situation because I'm like, why don't you care the way that I do? Oh my gosh, they're just being lazy. Oh my gosh, they're just being whatever. And after enough of that, and also just, again, maturing and growing up and identifying everything that you just explained, once I started to identify that of like, okay, wait, we're projecting our wants and needs onto this other person, onto these other people. Now, yes, they're involved in this thing with me. So it's easy to assume, well, they must want it the same way that I do. Mm-hmm. But their same way is a different way. They might also want it to be awesome or cool or fun, but that might just look different for them in general.
So this is why I own my own business, though, because my husband's really great about, he takes all these leadership courses. I feel like Josh would have this like technical term for this.
Right.
One of the things he's constantly telling me is, Ashley, quit expecting you out of other people. Mm-hmm. You know, lower your expectations. If you want to be happier in life, lower your expectations. However, I've been to therapy, and when I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, she was talking about how my type, like everybody has a coping or a piece of their anxiety disorder, and that a way that they cope with it. And one of mine is perfectionism. She was talking about how people who cope through perfectionism are often some of the hardest to treat and heal because we're rewarded for it. Mm-hmm. When she said that, I was like, I am. Because it's our anxiety and our fear that motivates us to always give people way more than other people would. I know for me, I've come to terms with being a perfectionist in certain areas of my life. I know, and my husband will tell you, I wish I could turn it off sometimes. And I'm still working on that, which is why I've started looking into spiritual podcasts and things, because very similar to Mel B or any of the business leadership podcasts you can listen to, if you start getting spiritual about it, my opinion is just you start to see this overlap where actually a lot of spiritual concepts are used in the business world, only they've changed the jargon to make it a little bit more appropriate to people who maybe think it's too woo-woo.
Right.
But I think that allowing yourself to just own your issues in a way that like, yes, I am a perfectionist and yes, I am anxious, but you know what? It's going to make me a great photographer for you on your wedding, because anything you could worry about, I've already worried about for you 100 times. Don't you worry. And if you tell me you're worried about something, I will not forget it. If you tell me you don't like something about yourself, I will make sure it's not in any of your 957 photos you get back for your gallery. You know what I mean? And so just like at this stage in my life, I'm very much like, yes, I am this way. And it makes me really great at this or really great at this. And just being able to drown out the noise of people who would maybe say, you know, oh, you shouldn't be that way. I get you shouldn't be like that all the time. And it can be unhealthy if you don't check it. Mm-hmm. But that's why when you and I started talking and you were telling me all these different things that you did, I was like, how do you do that? Because the tendency of me is if I do something, I am actually very black and white about it because I want it to be everything and I want to be meticulous about every little thing. But it is good to be able to turn that off and on and not do that all the time with everything. I love doing that for my work, but I don't need to do that when I'm baking chicken for dinner, you know?
Right. Yes.
It doesn't need to be like that all the time.
Of course.
I'm still learning that.
And so, yes, we are all still like actively growing and learning all these things. We're identifying all this stuff. Yes, we can sit on a podcast now and be like, oh, I'm in tune with myself, blah, blah, blah. Do you remember any time like growing up or young adulthood or anything where like yes, we talked earlier about how we were identifying that like, all right, these aren't great situations. I'm learning how to read a room real quick. Obviously, that's going to change my actions accordingly. Was there a time growing up where you feel like you did start to tap into, without all the knowledge that we have now, of being able to use any of these like emotions or anything like that of like, okay, can I start making this useful now? Or was it just more of a, kind of a, for lack of a better term, like survival mode? Was it just like, I was just going, dude, and I just started learning about this stuff 3 years ago?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good conversation to have, because you talked a little bit about people who are maybe not in a great place, and I wasn't in a great place in early adulthood. I wasn't the same person, and so I think there's different manifestations of using the ability to read a room. And I think when I was younger, especially like late teens, early 20s, used it very negatively, because you can use it to climb social ladders and join sororities and maybe date people who aren't great for you, but you just want to date them so you can say you dated them, kind of thing. Like really like immature about it. Mm-hmm. I wasn't like, I was young, you know what I mean? Young and dumb and just not what I am now.
Right.
So I do think you can use things for good or evil, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about like realizing and growing up and trying to actually, like, I'm big on karma now with relationships. And I just, like I said, I've changed a lot since having kids, and I've changed a lot since my 30s. And I try and treat everyone the way I want to be treated. And I am a big believer that you're going to get everything back that you put out there. And I think about that when I'm raising my kids, and when I'm with my family, and when I'm talking to you, and definitely when I'm at work. And even in terms of like business marketing, things like that, I really don't do much of that other than post on social media, because I just focus on the connections I make with my clients and trust that the universe will bring the rest of it back. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what was that chapter of like young adulthood like for you? And I asked this a lot on this podcast because, you asked me this earlier before we started rolling. You were like, so how did you get involved in all the things that you do? Did you go to college, all that sort of stuff? I shared that story with you of, I didn't go to college. I just wanted to dive straight into the creative world. I didn't. Obviously, I had regular jobs and tried to do this stuff on the side. But I always ask kind of what that chapter of life looks like for anyone I'm talking to, because it is like that's when we step into the adult world, and sometimes it's really messy. Other times some people are like, yep, I did this and that and now I'm here. Like, what was that time frame really like for you? I know you laid a little bit of the groundwork a few moments ago, but walk me through, like, who's Ashley during that time? What are you doing? Like, are you like, I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna do the journalism thing, like, I got it, this is my path? Or like, what does that look like?
I did. I graduated high school. My grandfather died the summer I graduated high school, like right in front of me. Like it was a very awkward, sad, horrible situation where I went to visit them right after I graduated high school, and I was going to get my hair cut or something. They were going to buy me clothes for college. And he came downstairs after being in bed, and he was going to check on like the dog's collar or something. He never got out of bed after going to bed. And I was downstairs watching Pretty Woman with my aunt. I'll never forget. And we had just had a conversation about how he was sick. And my aunt was like, yeah, he's sick. Everybody's worried about him. And I said, I know. It's not like he's going to die tomorrow, was what I said. And then he comes downstairs. He checks the dog. He comes in. I start holding his hand and tell him, like, I love how you hold my hand. And he says, why? And I said, well, no one holds my hand the way you do. And he kind of just laughed and said, I love you, and started his way up the stairs. I said, I love you too. He asked what time my haircut was the next day, went up the second flight of stairs, fell over it all the way down, landed right in front of me, and died. Like, brain started bleeding. It was like 11:30, so he actually died the next day at like 12:15 in the morning. And so that was the summer before I went to college. I'm smiling and laughing because it's what you do when you're like
right.
remembering something bad. But that was sort of what started adulthood for me, was that. And to this day, if someone is talking about something and they say something like I did, which is, it's not like he's going to die tomorrow, I'm knocking on things. It's something that never left me, that situation. But went to college, really almost flunked out that first semester of freshman year because my grandpa was like everything to me. I just wasn't good to myself. The whole like starving your body situation definitely was happening to me. And like I said, you were able to read people, but I wasn't a very good friend. You know what I mean? I wasn't a great friend. I wasn't on my game, and made a lot of connections that first semester in college that really kind of saved my life in terms of just not being so depressed and locked in my own world. And I always say, if you can leave home even for a little bit, it's really hard, but really worth it, because you have to grow up really fast. And second semester, freshman year was like a turnaround moment for me, where a lot of friendships really pulled me through that dark period of time where I just lost my grandfather. And I kept writing throughout all of that. And yeah, sophomore year was a totally different year. Joined a sorority, graduated college, got the job in news, moved from Indianapolis to the Ohio Valley, where I met my husband, and everything kind of took off from there. And honestly, it wasn't until, I would say, like, first of all, I was never going to get married, never going to have kids. And I think it was because I had seen how bad home life was, had not had a great time, and was afraid of any of that, because I only associated it with negative things. And again, I was not healed myself. And I think it took graduating college, getting the job that I said I was going to get, like checking, getting job offers from other cities, and realizing, like, okay, I'm not my parents. I can be my own person. Like, I've done it. I've left. I'm okay. Mm-hmm. I can fall in love if I want to. I can actually be myself with someone, rather than being this version of them I think I'm supposed to be, because I'm being manipulative, because I'm like not healed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I just met him at like the perfect time, where like I allowed myself to actually connect with someone, and the universe like handed him to me on a silver platter, like, because he's like perfect for me, like total opposite, like I said, calm in a storm, and I'm like the tornado spiraling through, but that was like 17 to 23.
Okay. So a lot of growing during that time of carrying that stuff with you. Mm-hmm. And I do think it's also very valuable for you to share the, like, yeah, for these couple of years, like, I don't really know if I was kind of this weird version of me, and I was doing these things.
You're young, you know what I mean? And that's why when I meet people now, I mean, I'm 38 years old, and when I meet people now and they're in these wacky relationships, and you're just young, you know what I mean? Like, we all are kind of assholes, honestly, at that age.
Yeah.
Like, and you look back on it and you could be embarrassed, or you could just be like, well, I was doing the best I could. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
you don't know what you don't know.
Right. No, I think about that all the time. And it's like, I like to think that I was never like a bad person. Like, I do think that I was relatively like on the good side, but you do think of the stupid things you did or whatever. And I'm like, of course I'm like, oh, that's so dumb. But then I really do give myself the grace of like, you were 20. You were 17.
Yeah.
Of course you thought that was funny, or of course you did this thing, or of course you didn't talk to that friend for a week because of this, or like whatever it was. But it's like, at the same time, like when I think about, I'm like, oh, I was so dumb when I was young. There's also like these weird moments of time where like I did very mature things for like my age at that time.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
I'm like, wait, that's strange. Like, what a weird balance of like, wow, you were such a dumb kid. And then I'm like, oh, you went to a friend's house to confront him after he was like talking a bunch of crap about you, but not to confront him as a fight. You literally just went to his dining room table and asked him to talk, and you talked it out and resolved a friendship. Like, those two things like don't make sense. You know what I mean? Make sense to me a lot. But I do think, yes, it's the value of, we were young. We don't know what we don't know. No. We're just figuring it out. Like, that's not, and it's hard sometimes to separate, because like, there are times where I think about people from like high school years or right after, where I'm like, man, they were an absolute dick to me. Like, they treated me terribly. And I am like, a small part of me is like, wow, like I still remember that, like how you made me feel. Mm-hmm. But then I'm like, but I wonder who they are now though. Because we change, we grow. All those things happen.
So when I moved to the Ohio Valley, it's weird to move to a place where everybody knows everybody that they went to high school with. Mm-hmm. Because that's not the case for a lot of the world. Like, you go to high school and then you move and you don't see each other again.
Right.
So I remember when I would work with clients, and when I first moved to that area, and they'd be like, oh, well, you should have known her in high school. And my response would always be like, how old is she now?
Yeah.
Like, people change.
Right.
And the idea is to grow and mature. And I would hope none of us were the same person we were in high school. I can like happily say I don't think I was a bad person in high school. I'm just saying I was immature in terms of relationships, and just the way I dealt with things was definitely to like turn inward and be depressed and not be good to myself, and you know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Yes. The young person thing to do most of the time. Like the things that we all did of like, oh yeah, I didn't handle that the right way.
But I mean, that's also why when it comes to the work I do now, I think I could either be like, oh my God, I'm 38, or the way I am, which is I'm 38. Like, that's kind of cool, because I feel like I bring a valuable maturity to a very like kind of younger situation, which is weddings in some cases, or engagements, or just the drama that can go along with a lot of things like that. And this isn't my first rodeo. You know what I mean? And I just feel like I'm at this stage of life where I'm just like so happy to be on this side of it. And if someone was like, would you go back? Like, would you want to be 21 again? I'd be like, yeah, if I could keep this mind. I don't want to go back and be 21 again the way I was 21 again. Like, that's why they say youth is wasted on the young, right? Because gosh, if we could all be young after doing everything, like we'd take over the world. You'd be unstoppable.
Oh, 100%. And I also think that like when I turned 30, I literally was like, people were like, oh, you're 30 now, and like not like overbearingly like negative or anything, but everyone's like, oh, 30, like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, it's actually pretty cool. I think like I feel pretty cool. Like it's kind of fun to now be like, and listen, I just turned 30 in 2023. Like I'm just getting there.
Yeah.
So like I'm not gonna be like, yes, I am wise of many years. Like, but like there is something to it. Like I've jokingly been telling a lot of people recently, like that I feel like when I turned 30, something in my brain literally switched.
I think scientifically it's like 27, 20, like
Okay.
25 or 27. I don't know. Google it. Your brain is not done forming until then.
Yes.
So that's probably not off base.
Yes. Because I 100% was like, oh, I'm thinking about a lot of things differently all of a sudden. Not like overnight, but I'm like, this has been a slow burn, and then it was like super slow, then all at once, like one of those sort of things.
I think between 30 and 34, a lot happens, like a lot shifts. And I think that some of it is just like experience of relationships, and you've learned kind of what works for you and what doesn't. But I think a lot of it is just you personally, emotionally, mentally change because you grow.
If I were to ask you, like, what do you think, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but when we think or see the people who maybe are 30, 34, 40, whatever, and doesn't really seem like they've figured that out, doesn't really seem like this, because I would take a very just share an honest opinion here, and I think a lot of people don't really figure themselves out, and they just sort of go day by day, and it's chaos all the time, and they add negativity to the world and all this sort of stuff. What do you think it is that like...
I don't know if you've seen, but apparently some people don't have an internal dialogue. Did you know that?
I have seen that, and I can't really comprehend what that is.
Right. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
There's also like similar studies where like people sometimes the level in which you can visualize things as you're reading is different. Like some people literally can't picture things mentally.
Wow. Okay.
So I think some of it is that.
Yeah.
I think some of it is like, I don't know if no one read to them when they were younger. I'm not joking. Like maybe it started at like toddlerhood and just something educationally was missing. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's from birth. I don't know. But I do know that they say some people don't speak to themselves in their minds and cannot picture things. So if you take that into consideration, I don't know how people like that comprehend things as they're happening. In terms of like, I know for me personally, something happens and then I think about it. And I don't just think about it from my point of view. I think about it from several point of views and I replay it. in my mind. That's valuable. And I don't think everybody does that.
Right.
But I also think that like being raised, if you went through trauma is one thing, but some people I think internalize being a victim forever.
Yes.
And I think it can work to their detriment for sure.
Yep.
I think you can get stunted at like 17. You know what I mean? In doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's always somebody else's fault or always somebody else's problem and you never have to like carry it on your own and move past it. And it's that whole understanding of like you reach a certain age and you realize, oh, my parents are human and like they are doing this for the first time too. And like being okay with that. But again, it goes back to like the woo-woo stuff where I don't know how deep you want to go with it, but like some people believe that we all have a soul family and we actually meet those souls in several different ways in several different lives. And when we pass, if we come back, it's to learn something we didn't learn in the previous time. And everybody's soul is a different age. And so some of these people that you're meeting that you're like, what is wrong with you? Why don't you know this? Might be their first time here. I don't know.
Wow. I love that.
I don't know.
I am a big fan of that. And if we had the time, I would make the rest of this podcast.
I don't know what you want, how far you want to go.
No, that is such a fun, like, I love that. I absolutely love that.
I do too.
I really
so
do.
I've like made it like my whole personality this year because I just find it fascinating.
It is. That is the best way to describe it. It's like, it's fascinating. Like that is something, and I'm like, yes, tell me all the things you've learned. Like, tell me, like, what are soul families? Where do we find them? How do you know?
I know,
like, all
right?
this, like, no, that is so interesting.
A psychic story. Yep.
Yes.
That's the podcast.
I'm 100% going
Lots
to
of
be...
hosts. And they all talk about different things, but that was one of the episodes where they talked about that. And some people can remember their past lives, and it's this whole thing.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna be saving that because I'm gonna be coming back to that at some point, and I'm probably gonna like message you or something like, "Did you listen to this episode?" Where the
I know, right?
100%.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
This episode is sponsored by THEAL, the brand aimed at helping creatives get out of the dark when it comes to the business end of creativity. Now, their goal is to create tools that organize and empower creative leaders to grow their productions and projects. So, how do they do that? Well, they've got a handful of plug-and-play ready digital assets to help you on the ground level of your business. From a profit and loss automator to help actively track and fine-tune your finances, the simple budgeter tool to help you break down and build out more appropriate budgets for your projects, or the Pitch Like a Pro kit that includes things like a discovery call outline, pre-production kit, pitching tool set, and even more. All developed and based off the many true hurdles that entrepreneurs and creatives of many kind are met with in trying to just streamline and systematize their business. But wait, there's more. If you want a more direct experience on how to clarify your business goals and really focus in on landing healthy budgets, aligning with your clients, feeling less burned out, and simply want to gain more confidence and clarity in your journey, well, THEAL offers one-on-one and group coaching sessions aimed at authentic conversations just built around self-discovery, and you can join the waitlist for these sessions anytime. So for everything you need to purchase or to look into any of the assets that I listed, or to simply get in contact with THEAL for any of the coaching sessions, for more information on the entire coaching process and what THEAL looks and feels like in general, you can visit ThealColor.com. That's THEAL Color, THEAL Color.com. And check this out. If you do go purchase anything, use the code WYDHPOD during checkout for a special discount on your purchases. THEAL. Being organized is being creative. Okay. Changing gears a little bit from the spiritual side to walk me through, like, I know you mentioned it earlier, but, you know, we do all the journalism stuff. We're working for a news station, you said, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then you transitioned out of that to stay at home with your daughter, correct? So was any of that like a big decision? What did you feel like you were walking away from anything, or were you like, I cannot wait to just go home, be a mom, and then we're going to see where life takes me? So
I left TV on a moral stand because I I went into news to report news and to be an actual reporter. And I quit that job. They had me sit outside of a hospital where Sarah Jessica Parker's surrogate was. I don't know if you remember that. It was a while ago.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm not a tabloid reporter.
Yeah.
This is not news. How do we even know she's there? You know? And they were like, well, we have on, you know, account from a local radio host. And I was like, I'm not taking news tips from a local radio host. So anyway, they make me go. I put in my 2-week notice after that. And when they made me go live from this hospital, and I said allegedly probably 97 times on principle because I was so mad I had to cover it, and put in my 2-week notice after that. And I did like some voiceover work for a talent group agency in Pittsburgh. I did like commercial modeling, voiceover work, stuff like that for the interim before I started my own business, because we actually struggled with infertility, so I didn't get pregnant right away. So that's what I did during that time. And yeah, then I had her, and it wasn't like a conscious decision other than that to leave news. I think I felt fine with it because I knew if I had wanted to stay and if I had wanted to go to a different market, I could. So it was, I feel like there's definitely power in knowing you did something, knowing you could keep doing it, and then you can walk away. If I had felt like unfinished or unfulfilled, I don't think I would have felt as good about it.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, the TV thing ended, and then did the voiceover stuff. And then she was like maybe 2 or 3 when I started the photo business. It's been 10 years and she's 12. So,
Okay. So let's talk about the photo stuff.
Yeah.
We laid the groundwork for it earlier, but let's dive into like that is the main thing that you now do. So you said earlier it just started of just like taking photos of your daughter, and it was just like fun. Like, I mean, how did you even get that camera? Like, did you purposely buy a camera to kind of document like her growing up?
No, I didn't buy the first camera. I think it was like from college. It was like a little like, I don't know, not even a real.
Yeah, so you just like had it around.
Just
and you were
had
like,
it.
I just want to start using this thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember the moment that it clicked for you, like no pun intended, of like where it just like clicked for you, where you were like, wait, I want to do more with this. Like let's do something.
It was, so my husband and I played World of Warcraft a lot, and we had like an office set up just like you and I are sitting right now, and we were just I raided, like hardcore raided for several years, like 3 times a week appointments, was doing this, and we were just sitting there, and it just hit me one night, and I was like, I'm gonna start a photography business. And he was like, okay. And it was as simple as that, and I just ran with it. And I do feel like every once in a while the universe gives you a gift, and you can either run with it or you cannot. And when it's something you're supposed to do, you'll know because you hit all green lights. Because I have felt since I said yes to that thought, like I was hanging on to the back of a pickup truck going 97 miles an hour on a gravel road. Like, you just say yes and the rest just kind of happens. So it just really fell into place. Like,
yes,
truthfully.
There are a handful of ideas that I have done, do whatever, where it was the exact same thing, where I was like, I'm going to try this. We're going to see how it feels. I think it'd be fun. And then like, you know, if it's going to stick, you know, if it has a reason. I also think there was, I don't remember what it was from, but there was this thing that was described of like how you get ideas. And they, you know, it's like this artistic, you know, magical way of explaining it. But it was like that around us at all times is kind of like a free flowing river of energy and ideas and thoughts and all this sort of stuff. And they were sort of using it to, one, explain that like sometimes when you're in a room with somebody and you both get the same idea at the same time, that's because the idea has literally flowed through both of you. And then you're both like, hey, do you want to get Chipotle today? And they're like, I was just about to ask you. It's like part of it's that of like the idea can flow through both of you, but then otherwise you can almost like catch an idea, like your head is effectively in the figurative river, right? And the idea flows in through your head, and then you decide whether you do something with it or not. And I've definitely had those like quote unquote eureka moments where like it just flows into your head, and I'm like, whoa, I see what I could do so clearly.
Right.
Like, I know step 1 through 10 of doing it. I know, like, and again, like, there has been, like, the best example I can give is, like, the improv comedy podcast that I do. I had been like wanting to do something in the comedy world for a while, and I love improv comedy and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, I wonder if I can make a podcast out of it. Like, I don't know. I'd been sitting on it for like months of like, I have no idea what to do. And legitimately, I was sitting one night and it just popped into my head. I wasn't like sitting there like writing out ideas and really thinking on it. I was just sitting and it just popped. And I'm not kidding. Like, everything about the show. Like the rules for how it works, the structure of it, how I promote it, like every single thing. And I noted it all down. And like 4 days later, I got two friends together and I was like, we need to test this thing. I need to see if it works. And then literally a couple days later, it existed. And I was like, I'm going to make a show out of this. Like, and it's been one of the most fun things I ever did.
I think some of it can be like spiritual where you're like given the idea. And I think others are subliminal, and it's why your environment is so important and who you talk to is so important. The whole like you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with
100%.
theory. And also like if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room type situation. And so some of it is that, I think sometimes too.
100%.
Like who are you with? What are you doing? What are you consuming?
Yes.
It's why I'm a big believer in like in terms of social media, I post, but I'm very, very careful about what I consume. And as far as ideas, I know in our industry specifically, you have to really like think about where did I get this idea? Because people will think they got it on their own, not realizing, well, actually.
Yeah, I can't remember what the term is for that, but there's an actual term for like, no, you saw someone else do this. It stayed dormant in your brain. Then it popped up.
It's like when you go shopping and then you walk out and you're like, oh, no, what? And you're like, wait a second, that song just came to my mind, but then you realize it was actually playing in Old Navy.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I do think that some of it's that. That's what the idea of flowing thing is actually just like you must be surrounded with good people who put out good vibes.
Right. Yes. It's not what's floating through the air is not a bunch of like trash.
It's not
like,
random.
Yes.
And like you definitely need to be very conscious about what you're doing at all times and who you're hanging out with and even where you live and you know what I mean? And so I know like for inspiration specifically, I try and post and like comment on my friends' stuff and then I get off because I want my ideas to come from the life that I'm living so that they're organically my own. Inspired by real things happening to me. I love watching, movies and listening to music and, like I'm listening to ACOTAR, the ACOTAR series right now.
Okay.
A Court of Thorn and Roses. Huge nerdy thing, but a lot of the women listening are probably like, yes. It's like a spicy fairy book. Okay. But I'm listening to that right now. I'm on the 3rd book and I noticed that as I've been listening to this traveling, it's like over 30 hours of listening I've done, but it's the first time I've listened to an audiobook in a long time, like a fictional audiobook. And I noticed when I looked back on like my last few posts on Instagram, they're like long, like I'm an author, you know?
Incredible. I love it.
And I'm just like, it's probably because I'm listening to this book and I'm just like, let's talk as if,
Yes.
So anyway,
No,
it all
totally
connects.
That absolutely makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. So walk me through, how do you start a photography business? What did you do? You had the idea.
You just start. It's just like with anything. You just have to jump. You know what I mean? My husband and I were just talking about an idea that he had, and it's like you can sit and think about something for 97 years, or you can just do it. I think I purchased my first camera on a credit card and paid it off over a year. And I just started. I took pictures of my daughter, which led to another mom saying, oh, can you take pictures of my kid? And I was like, sure, I'll do it for $25. And I shot my first wedding for $800. And you just do it. And you learn and you fail. And, I would say that if someone was thinking about starting a business like this, the way people start photography businesses now is so different than the way I did it because of content days. And because of so many people being teachers and mentors now, which is amazing, but the reason it can be not dangerous, but like not necessarily great for your potential creativity is because you don't have to do it the way anybody else did it. And also, if you're not careful, it can cause a lot of noise, unnecessary noise of like, oh, well, they did it this way, so this is the way I need to do it too. And also just the way things are on social media, I've learned over the years, people who I like previously either looked up to or just know in circles that other people learn from, it's sometimes not even their full-time job. So it's like, you can't trust everything you see online either. So like the way I started was just doing it. I just did it, and it was with local people in that area. I didn't go anywhere else. I didn't post any content that I got from somewhere else. It just, one thing naturally led to another, and I raised my prices very, very slowly, and it's all I do now. You know what I mean? But it wasn't this thing where it's like, I have to have this perfectly curated feed out the gate. Like, I did make sure to have a website to be professional, and I did what I said and said what I meant, which is important. But I don't know, there's just a lot now that people think, oh, I have to do this and you don't have to do any of that. You just have to show up for people and do what you say you're going to do. Yeah. Charge accordingly, grow slowly, and then navigate from there, you know?
How do you balance your, I know we talked about the consumption of social media, but I'm really interested to know, how do you balance your just usage of social media in general from like a branding standpoint, but how that meshes into how you personally feel, kind of like you were talking about, because it's something that like I've got a way better handle on. Yeah. But a conversation that I have often with people is like, it's just the annoyance of like, well, am I turning this into content? Did I post enough? When did I post? Now I got to post this as a YouTube short, as an Instagram reel, as a Facebook reel, as a TikTok. And then did I format each of them right? Did I use the captions on this one, but not on this one? You're supposed to use the captions on this. It's like the amount of just chaos that it takes to share something, right? And I think a lot of it comes from the top down of like, determine, are you trying to be a content creator? Are you trying to be an influencer? Are you trying to be a business owner? Are you trying to be what are you? Yeah. And then figure out what you really want to do. But I would love to know, because I do think you're good with social media, but a lot of what we've talked about up until now, it sounds like you've got a good balance of like maybe not letting it control your life or control what you create for. So 2 questions. I would love to know if that was ever a battle where you were like, am I starting to lean a little too into, am I worrying about being like photographer influencer person, or am I being a good photographer? And then more so, what did you do? What does that control look like for you of, I know how to enjoy my social, to talk about and promote the things that I love and that I do in my work without it leaning into the territory of, did I post 7 times today? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I would say like right after COVID, it wasn't great for me.
Okay.
And I think it's because I was too concerned with how I was being perceived maybe. And thought I was, I did a workshop around then, and I don't know, my circle got too big. My immediate circle of people I was like letting influence my ideas and my thoughts. And I think that in the photography industry specifically, it's great to have a few close friends who do this work, but it's even better to have friends who are just in the industry. So maybe people that are in video and people who do hair and people who do makeup. But what I think had happened for me around 2020, because we were also isolated, was just it was the whole, like it was the world. You know what I mean? And so since like we moved, and I moved to a new place and started meeting new people, and the world got bigger again, is so important. You know what I mean? And I just realized like, oh, that doesn't matter. And so then I just got back to, instead of thinking about social media in terms of like me, and it matters so much for me, I just use it now to share the work that I'm doing. And these are my clients, and this is what we did this week, and they're great for this reason. And it takes all of that out of it. And if it's about the vibes, like if it's just like with meeting people in real life, if I'm interacting with someone online and just for whatever reason the vibes are off, I hate to say, I just mute. And I don't unfollow, because it's nothing personal, you know, but I just mute. Like if it just feels like, hey, maybe their head's not in this for the right reason, or for whatever reason this isn't healthy for me personally, I just mute it and just move on, and then love them from afar kind of thing. But like I said, really, I don't spend much time scrolling, especially on Instagram. I love TikTok for that. But I just try and just share the work. And that is what it is. And I try and update people every once in a while on, new family pictures or whatever. so that they know I'm a real human and I have real thoughts, and I get a little bit deeper about my personal thoughts on my stories sometimes, but I don't share as much as I used to. I try to keep the lights on, but I don't share my personal thoughts as much as I used to, and I don't share anything until it's done anymore. I don't think people have power over your life, but I think you can absorb people's energy. And I think that not everyone is out for your best good, especially when it comes to artistic projects. And there's a lot of watching on social media, and just put it out there when it's finished. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely feel like I went through the same phase where for a while, like, I've always written, like long, deep captions like that became a joke with a bunch of people who knew me. It's like, oh yeah, there's another book from Ross in the captions, right? Like, I've always done that, but I also at the same time is this picture really, really cool? Is this picture trendy? Am I editing it in the trendy way? Is this video going to get attention? Like, there was definitely a balance, right? Where like I was authentic, but I also was, please like me.
You're right.
And then finally, once I got past that, it's like now I just look at social. I'm just like, this is like, I like to use it as a public journal and a scrapbook. Like that's essentially, you know what I mean? It's like, it's the new version of those things, or well, public journals never existed, but you get what I'm saying. I have no problem. Like, I like to share my thoughts out there. I like to write a long caption like you were talking about, of like, here's really what I'm feeling. Here's where I'm at. Here's whatever, in effort to relate. Or maybe if it does educate somebody, cool, I'll share those things too. I'll share some thoughts and opinions and all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to creations, it's like, yeah, this is a portfolio. It's a living portfolio that everybody gets to look at and stuff. But like, I really have settled into that realm of, and again, it doesn't mean that every single time I post and then a reel gets 100 views, I'm not like, that deserves way more, but I'm still like, I'm just sharing. I'm just posting. I'm just sharing. I can't fight an algorithm. I can't fight the way that all the apps work now. And like, TikTok's probably the best one, but I kind of think all the social media platforms are broken now. I think they're all like working in really, really backwards ways. I don't think it's about connecting with people anymore. I do think that you can, but I think the more and more that comes out that we hear and learn is like, it is all about algorithms trying to feed everything to everyone to consume, but then it's only going to, like, it's going to figure out what your niche is. It's going to feed you only those things. And, I have close friends who, like, if they don't like enough of my post, they just stop knowing what I'm up to. And then the next time I see them, they're like, dude, I missed that like short film that you posted. It's so cool. I missed it. Instagram didn't show it to me. Right. And that's a whole other podcast conversation. But the point being is that like, I've definitely like through a battle have definitely settled into that realm of, okay, it is what it is. I'm just going to share. If it's liked by a bunch of people, it's liked by a bunch of people. It's liked by few people. It's liked by few. It doesn't ultimately matter, because what you said is real life is real life. Social media, the internet is, yes, that can translate into things in real life, but it's ultimately, it's not real. No.
And I think you have to think about it. If you think about social media more in terms of, would I say this to someone in real life, and think about who am I talking to, And so for me, I know in the last year, there's been a big shift of like, I'm not talking to the millions of people I wish would like this post. I'm talking to the 30 couples I could service for this year. I just need, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I just definitely think about it in terms of that. And at the end of the day, you can't write off Instagram as a business owner. It's still one of the largest ways I get new clients.
Yep.
So it's a valuable free tool to give respect and post professionally, and to keep in mind that when you're on there, you are a business owner, and to not put your mess on there. That's the way I feel. And to just be professional about it, and to not expect everyone to like it, because everyone doesn't need to like it. Yep. You just need the people who it's meant for to like it,
100%.
But TikTok is different. So TikTok for me, my platform on Instagram grew very slowly. And like back in the day, it grew of the whole like, follow me and I'll follow you, and follow Train. And when I look back at my stories from like 2017, 2018, it was a lot of like, you daily would share different photographers and then they'd all follow you. And it was this whole weird thing. Like, honestly, when I look back on it now, it feels like instant messenger or something.
Right.
But it took a lot of time, and it's slowed drastically because I didn't do like there was like a real boom in 2020 where if you did those like every day, you could go from like 1K to 100K. You know what I mean? But if you targeted photography specifically. So anyway, Instagram's been like that. I love TikTok because TikTok is my TikTok's like a baby and has surpassed my Instagram. But my TikTok doesn't bring me as much income. But I find it's more fun because it reaches like the entire world. Whereas Instagram's very, very niche-y to like the city you live in, honestly. The city you live in, the people who know you. It's very personal in that way. It's very rare to post an Instagram and somebody in Florida right now sees it and is like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas on TikTok, that's not true. I've had several TikToks reach over 1 million people, and it's like cool and also kind of scary because it's like, whoa, that's a lot of people that saw that. But it's just more fun, I feel like, because it's not as, I don't know. Instagram's like your new website, honestly.
Yeah.
You gotta be real serious. Whereas on TikTok, you can have a little bit more fun. But
Right.
I know clients like to see both. I mean, when I get inquiries and when I'm talking to people, they'll say like, I did a deep dive and I looked at your whole website and your Instagram and your TikTok. They look at it. So you have to still like be professional there. But I feel like you can be a little bit sillier and like not so serious.
Yeah. Oh, and it's figuring out like identifying those things of like, how does this work for me? Or what do I want out of it? Do I want this to be like my business thing? Do I want this to be my public journal? Do I want this to be my writing dumps where I'm just going to go write cool stuff and post a random photo with it and people get to come connect with my words?
Yeah.
You know, it's like figuring out, like, I think that's now the power of social media is like, not how can I be everything to everybody, but it's like, what do I want to be and just how do I want to share it?
Yeah. And providing value. Like when I post on TikTok, it's either for entertainment value or to share something from a recent wedding that I know a potential client would want as an idea and will save and share. And for that reason, you know what I mean? Instead of thinking about like, I'm just going to post a post. Like, what am I trying to say? What's the value here? What's the idea? What's the concept? Is always kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah.
You know?
The intention behind everything. Do you remember, photography wise, do you remember there being like a moment where you were like, oh, this is working? Or like, oh, this is my job now. Like, this is like the thing. Like, do you remember that?
I do, only because of taxes. So I remember it was like the second or third year, and my husband called our accountant, and the accountant was like, okay, this is how much she made this year. You owe me money. And I was like, how much have I made this year? Where did that go? You know, like, and I had to pay like a hefty amount for that January payment. That was the first time I realized like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm actually doing this. And that was that was the first time I personally learned the value of like when something becomes your identity, how you definitely like, the universe then gets in line and follows. So it is very important, the stuff you tell yourself and the labels you put on yourself, like I am this and I am that, but also being able to step outside and be like, wait, that's not all I am. You know what I mean? For your mental health.
Yes.
But that was the first time that I was like, oh, okay, I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. You're like,
the imposter syndrome is real. Like still, I think people have this misconception that like, if you have a certain number of followers or if you make a certain number of money or if you've been doing it for however long, that like, you're never going to doubt yourself ever again and you've got it all figured out. What I wish people understood about me personally was like that I question myself literally every day about like, is this good enough? Did I do this correctly? And I think it's the only reason that I'm still in business. Because I think that the second you're not humble, you will be humbled. And every session, I'm nervous at the beginning of every session. And every single day, I'm thinking like, am I bringing enough to the table? Is there something I should be doing differently? I have certain things I'm very confident in, obviously, because I've done it so many times. But those nerves never really go away. And I think the day that they do is the day I need to be done. You know?
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a favorite, like, wedding or couple memory? Like, is there one that sticks out of like, you're like, this was like the thing that I was like, yep, this is why I like to do this?
I can't give you one. No, I definitely can't give you one. I mean, this year, I know that I've had a lot of people lose people, and my photos have been used, sadly, for more obituaries than I like to say. And when things like that happen, I realize the gravity of what I'm doing. But there hasn't been one particular couple. Every single couple that I work for reminds me of how personal what I do is, and how much it means on a way deeper level than people, I think, realize. I wish when people were hiring a photo and video team, they realized that they're with us like more than they're with anyone all day. Because I think some people just don't get how personal it is. But for me, no, there wasn't like one couple or one moment where I was like, oh, it's been like a wild ride from the beginning. And every year, at the end of every year, you take stock and you think like, what do I want to do differently? I mean, because I didn't do weddings when I first started. Obviously, it wasn't like all I did. I got my start in families. So you definitely have to look back every year. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What was okay? What do I not want to do anymore? You know, that kind of thing.
What about the opposite? And I'm not asking for, well, this one couple was insane, but has there been a moment where you were like, I don't know, actually, as much as I love this, I do not know if I can keep doing this or don't want to?
I think that just being friends with other photographers, I definitely know ways I don't want to do things. And I know that, so like it wasn't the couple, but the first wedding I shot was $800. And I remember coming home, never am doing that for $800 again. That was a thought for sure. And I mean, that I remember I went from 800 to 1200 and then 1200 to 1500. And then at the end of that year, you look and you realize you've made no money because you had to buy new equipment or just whatever. And so financially, I know I say that a lot. And the reason I do certain things changes because this is my job. This is how I put food on the table, you know? I think sometimes as creatives, we think it's all about just the art of it. And it is, but this is also the way I make a living. So being analytical about some of the decisions is important too.
If I were to ask you about the overly cliche term of work-life balance, and if I just said, Ashley, how do you do it? Like, what advice would you give? Or what do you do? What's your answer?
I mean, I couldn't do it without my family, without the support of my family. I don't know. As a mother, anyways, like your partner, if you do this work and you have children and you don't have a supportive partner, that makes it exponentially harder. Like my husband picks up so much slack that people don't understand. He's the one who puts the gear in my car before a wedding, who irons my pants, like little things like that. But also just being able to tolerate a creative person, even if you don't do photography, being able to tolerate us during peak seasons is hard. And if you don't have someone helping you re-center or ground yourself, because we're like a lot to deal with. I know I'm a lot to deal with, especially like right now, like in November. It's the end of wedding season. I'm editing everything. I have a lot to crank out here in the next few. I'm not fun to be around at home right now. And like having people in your life that accept that and understand that about you and don't hold that against you and understand that I'll be a different person in January. Like that. Definitely that.
Yeah. Okay. Last few things here. And then we're going to wrap this up. So something new I've been doing is I've been collecting questions from past guests for them to give me to ask future guests.
Cool.
So I am going to toss one of these your way.
Gotcha.
So is there anything you've been holding back on to be a more authentic you?
I don't think so.
I love that. I love that then. When do you feel like you identified that? Like, when do you feel like you...
I would say in the last 2 years.
Okay. And what did that look like? Maybe what did that used to look like then? What do you feel like the former... And obviously neither of us mean it in like a super negative way, but like what would an inauthentic version of Ashley look like?
being willing to talk to everyone and be nice to everyone and just be friends with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't good for me. That wasn't authentic to me.
Yeah.
I'm a Gemini, so I can just talk to literally anyone, which is fine when you just need to be on and it's not important. But when it came to personal relationships, I would let everyone in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just being able to be like, this is this kind of friendship.
Yes.
Or this isn't a friendship.
There's a lot of value of making yourself remember that you don't have to be on all the time.
Yeah.
I
Or
used
just
to
that
do
not
that.
everybody's right for you either. And that's
Yes.
and that's okay. And it doesn't say anything negative about you or about them. It's just like you
Yeah.
don't belong in my current story. That's fine.
We sort of touched on that earlier. Like, I used to do that a lot.
Yeah.
I would absolutely be like, oh, we had sort of a good conversation. We must think the same and we must be on the same trajectory creatively and all this sort of stuff. And then it's the expectations thing, right? I would set it higher where I'm like, oh my gosh, we had one good conversation. That must mean they want this thing as bad as I do. And heck yeah, we're going to be bad. I'm letting everybody in. And then you do set yourself up for disappointment, which is nothing that they did wrong. It's you
Right.
setting the expectation of like, they must be like this. And when that's not who they are, you can't be mad at them for that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think that there's a lot of value. And you mentioned it earlier, like the sum of five theory. Like that is a difficult thing sometimes to maintain, to remember who you're letting in, who you're like, who or even what, I would say, you're consuming the most actively. What are
And
like
the conversations you're having with people.
Yes.
Like I definitely would say in the last 2 years, if it's not serving my best and highest good, I'm just not doing it. I'm not even going to talk about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we touched on the past a little bit. The past is in the past to me. And so like if we're having a conversation and somebody brings up something said 3 weeks ago and they just want to talk about that for, I don't know why. I just don't involve myself in conversations like that. If I do, it's with like two people, like my husband and my best friend, and that's it. Because you know what I mean? Like you got to keep your circle small.
Yep.
Trust is very few people, honestly. And just other than that, like if it's not a positive conversation, there's kind of no point in having it. But it takes you being authentic enough to be like, nah, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
Or just not saying anything. Like you don't always have to return conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
So we talked about the past being the past. I want to talk about the future a little bit. If a future, we're going to play pretend for a second.
Okay.
If future Ashley
Yeah.
showed up right now, what do you hope that she's telling you?
I just hope she's telling me that we're healthy and happy and that my family's healthy and happy. And that doesn't, I don't have really like tangibles on that. I'm not tied to any one place or any one thing. I'm open to whatever happens. I just want everybody to be healthy and happy. That's it.
I love it. I love it. I have one final question for you, and then we're going to wrap everything up. Unless there's anything, is there anything you feel like we haven't touched on where you're like, dude, we didn't even talk about this
No,
thing.
I mean, that kind of went like all over the place.
Yes.
I don't know if people were going to be listening for photography stuff specifically, which I feel like I didn't really talk about, but no.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, perfect. The fact that we did go all over the place means that this went according to plan, if I'm being honest. So
Okay,
we
good.
covered it. You kept bringing, you're like, I don't know if you want to talk about this woo-woo stuff. I'm like, yes, let's go.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
fine.
Woo.
So one final question. So right now, I want you to pretend like everyone in the world is listening to you speak. So you have a live mic attached to everyone, everywhere. We're throwing logic out the window. Everyone can hear you and understand you.
Okay.
And you get the opportunity to share one thing with everybody. What is it that you're telling them? And what would you really want everyone to hear?
I'm not going to think about that too much because that's like, I don't want to try to be too like profound. I know for me right now, an important message to remember is that the universe does not want your life to be hard. It wants you to be happy. And it's as simple as that. So if there's a situation you're in that's causing you unhappiness or that feels too hard, there's a message there. There's something you're missing. There's a pivot that needs to happen or some soul searching you need to do there because life should be fulfilling and you should be happy. So if there's a relationship you're in or a situation you're in and you're sad or like you just feel sick, then like something's off. So that's important to me right now. But just, I think that would be it.
I love it. You said I'm not going to be profound and then drop some amazing stuff. So.
Well, I didn't want to like overthink it because I feel like there's so much that you could say if you wanted to tell people something, but that's...
No, I absolutely love that. This was a blast.
Yes, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so stoked. I said at the very beginning of this and I'll say it again. I'm so stoked that, like, yes, working together has been fun and creating all that sort of stuff, but like getting to sit down with you and know you in this way and all this sort of stuff after just years of like sort of knowing you, sort of knowing about you. And yeah, we asked a lot of like cool questions for like your videos and all that sort of stuff, but that was more like there was a goal in mind of like, we're getting this stuff done. Let's make it sound cool and look cool, all this sort of stuff. This just getting, I really appreciate the time of just like getting to sit down with you and just everything that you shared. Like I 100% am leaving here like, oh, I know Ashley 100 times better than I did coming in. Like,
I'm glad.
I'm so happy we got to do this.
I am too. Thank you so much for having me. This is great. I would love to do this anytime.
Yes, 100%. Before we go, it'll all be in the show notes, but just in case, are there any major things you would want people to go find you at? We talked a lot about social media and all the stuff you're doing. Where can people find you? What's your website? All that sort of stuff if they want to reach out.
Yeah, they could go to my website, which is just www.ashleytracyphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram as @AshleyTracyPhoto. I'm on Pinterest as the same, and I'm on TikTok as @ashley.tracy.
Beautiful. We did it. We
Yes.
made a podcast. Thank you so much. Thank
Silent
you.
clap. Thank you.
I'll add applause in at the end.
Okay.